Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my do not draft wide receiver list for fantasy football in 2021. Now, this video is based upon their current ADP. These are not guys that I'm necessarily not wanting to draft regardless of where they are going, right? If they go at the right price, then I'm ready to pay up and actually go ahead and draft these guys, but based upon where they are going right now, upon current average draft position, there is no way that I want to be drafting any of these guys to any of my 2021 fantasy football rosters. I have also done on my channel my must draft, my must own at wide receiver, running back, tight end, and quarterback, which I plan on doing for the do not draft series as well. So if you guys do end up enjoying this video, you end up having a great time, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to try to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first guy I want to be talking about today is honestly one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL, and it's a tough pill for me to swallow, the fact that I just feel like it's gonna be a down year for this guy in 2021, and that is wide receiver of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Mike Evans. And if I'm being honest with you, I feel the exact same way I feel about Mike Evans as I do with Chris Godwin. I believe that in the way that this offense works with Tampa Bay Tom Brady under center, that none of these guys really have wide receiver one upside. No, Nick, you realize that Mike Evans was a wide receiver one last year. I understand, but I believe with Godwin healthy, Godwin was not healthy last year. He did miss a bunch of time with Antonio Brown potentially playing a full 16 slate of games. Now I understand, or 17 games it is now. I understand that Antonio Brown isn't necessarily the best of guys, so maybe he ends up getting suspended again, but I'm not going to assume that. I'm going to assume that Antonio Brown is a new guy, a new man who's going to play 17 games in 2021. Then what do you do with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin? To me, you just fade him. You just don't draft him, because I think the upside is so limited in this offense with so many guys around. And then you also have to think about it. During the season last year, do you remember how Gronk really wasn't that good? How Gronk was kind of just, I was like, damn, maybe Gronk's washed up, right? He's going out there, he's blocking pretty well, but you don't get fantasy points for blocking, right? He's not really even going out for too many routes, right? A couple of weeks in, he's doing nothing, right? Everyone's like, damn, this was the stupidest fantasy pick ever, and it kind of was. And then a couple of weeks after that, the guy starts balling out, he's playing pretty well, and he's just up and down, not really playing super well, but not really playing bad enough to where everyone's like, you know what, Gronk fucking sucks, he needs to retire. Then, in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl, Rob Gronkowski is eating like Ezekiel Elliott during Thanksgiving dinner. He is just feasting on these defense in the Super Bowl. He scores 2 tutties, like he said in the fucking, if you guys watch the mic'd up, yeah, he scored 2 touchdowns. He's playing amazing. So what happens now if it's Evans, Godwin, Brown, and Gronkowski actually getting targets? Then what happens? Then we are shit out of luck drafting a guy like Mike Evans at pick 39.6, where he's going based upon current ADP. He is going too high for my liking. Now, I understand in best ball why you may end up liking a guy like Mike Evans, right? Because some weeks this guy's going to have a blow-up game where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lay the smackdown from down under on these teams, right? That is entirely possible, but I think on a week-in, week-out standpoint, Mike Evans is just one of those guys that you pick that does not get me excited at all. I do not see too much upside with Mike Evans in an offense that is stacked with weapons. In 16 games last year, Mike Evans was a wide receiver 1. Like I said, wide receiver 11 in PPR, wide receiver 10.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 8 in standard. From points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 16 in PPR, tied with Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 13.5 PPR, tied with Julio Jones, and wide receiver number 10 in standard, averaging 15.5 PPR points per game, 13.4 half PPR points per game, and 11.2 standard points per game. So Mike Evans obviously is a very talented player. I have talked about this numerous times on my channel. I started making videos in 2018. Now in reality, I just made one video. 2019, 2020 was when I was really making content, and I've loved Mike Evans both of those years. He's one of my favorite wide receivers in the NFL. He's a big boy, 6'5", 230 pounds, and he knows how to control his body well, and he's like a 1,000-yard receiver every single year, but something strange happened last year that made me think, you know what, maybe we just got a bit of a juiced Mike Evans compared to where he should have finished, And maybe everyone's a little too high on him last year, as most people have Evans listed inside of either their top 10 at the wide receiver position or top 12. I don't see too many people with him outside the top 12 besides myself. Targets last year, 109. 24th highest at the targets, right? That's pretty solid. Receptions, 70 receptions, 27th highest at wide receiver, and 989 receiving yards, 17th highest at wide receiver. So, hold the phone. How do you finish as a top 10, top 12 wide receiver, and you're not top 10 in targets, receptions, or receiving yards? Didn't even have over 1,000 receiving yards. I understand 989 is basically 1,000, right? That could be the thought process, and you throw that out. He did get 1,000 yards in your head, right? But you want to know why this number was so high on finish on the season and points per game? It's because this guy was literally owning the end zone. He was like a dog. He took a piss in the end zone. He's like, I own this. That's what he did. 13 touchdowns last year, 4th highest at wide receiver. And you're like, yeah, that's crazy. But how crazy is that? An 18.6% rate of touchdowns. Basically, 1/5 of the time Tampa Bay Tom threw the ball to Mike Evans, this motherfucker scored a touchdown. Do you know how crazy that is? That is such a high number. It's something that you can't rely on week in and season in, season out, right? He's not going to score 13 touchdowns again. And if he does, it's another outlier season. To me, that number itself, 18.6%, should tell you why you should be fading Mike Evans in 2019, right? I'm telling you, this guy is a touchdown monster. He likes to score touchdowns. But in 2019, he scored 8 touchdowns at 11.9% rate. That number is even high, but it's much more normal than 18%, almost 20% of the time. It's so crazy. And I think that people are going to point to the numbers that, Nick, you know what? And I understand this is a legitimate narrative. If you look at the splits with Evans in the game and with Antonio Brown in the game, Evans actually does better with Chris Godwin Evans actually does better with Antonio Brown in the game, which is crazy. But then you have to understand that Godwin was missing some of those games. Godwin wasn't there. So I think with the three amigos there at the wide receiver position, that I genuinely worry about Mike Evans. I really do. I understand why people might like him. He's on the Bucs. He played very well last year. I understand all that, but I'm trying to think forward, and I'm thinking that maybe this run of being great for Mike Evans might just go down, with Antonio Brown playing a full 16, 17 game slate. Next wide receiver I want to talk about is another guy that I love deeply, but I think that this team change has screwed this guy royally. Wide receiver, formerly of the Detroit Lions, now of the New York Football Giants. Wide receiver Kenny Galladay, underdog ADP 57.4. Now, I genuinely believe Kenny Galladay is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. I believe that. But with this move to New York, I do not see much upside. I do not believe Daniel Jones is any good. If I'm being honest with you, I don't believe that. Now, I have seen sparks of Daniel Jones being a legitimately solid quarterback. I can admit it. His rookie year, that game up against Tampa Bay, Daniel Jones was looking like the second coming of football Jesus Christ. That's what he was looking like, correct? And then, correct, like, as if you can fucking, answer, right, where I'm just talking to you. But, yeah, Daniel Jones was looking good. He's shown some good sparks of playing well. But then you look at the stats, right? This guy turns the ball over so much. So, why do you want a wide receiver with a quarterback that's not the greatest? On a team, not the greatest in my opinion. I just don't really see it. I love Kenny Galladay. I think Kenny Galladay is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. But I just do not see it in New York. Last year in Detroit, he was missing so many games. He had a hip injury, which sucks, obviously. Let's see down below. Down here it says he had a hip injury week 8, missed 9 total games. But in reality, I don't think the guy really was hurt. And he also had a hamstring strain week 1, which made him miss 2 games. So the guy was never really healthy. But the hip injury to me wasn't much of a concern. You could see him in a picture. He's with this girl and his hip, he's doing some type of hip moves, if you know what I'm saying. Congrats on the sex to Kenny Galladay. So he definitely was fine. I think he was just fuck Detroit, Stafford, I'm sorry, Stafford, I'm leaving. I don't want anything to do with this franchise. So I'm just not going to show up here. I'm not going to play the rest of these games. And I don't like that out of players personally, but I understand, right? The fucking Lions were a dumpster fire. So in these, like, 5 games he's playing, he's just playing all right. He finishes wide receiver 102 in PPR, 102 and a half PPR, 99 in standard. Obviously, if you're just playing 5 games, you're not going to go anywhere near the top 50. From a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 35 in PPR, tied with CeeDee Lamb, 31 and a half PPR, and wide receiver 24 in standard, averaging 13.2 PPR points per game, 11.2 half PPR points per game, and 9.2 standard points per game. So even when he was playing, he wasn't playing the greatest. But again, I do believe that Kenny Galladay is an upper echelon NFL wide receiver. But again, I'm going to continue to keep pointing at the team he is on. Kenny Galladay to the Giants is perfect for the Giants football team. It is a perfect move. You let Daniel Jones prove it with a legitimate, in my opinion, top 12 wide receiver in the NFL. It makes perfect sense. You make that move if you're the Giants. But for fantasy purposes, the Giants basically took us and bent us over the table and raw dogged us for what Kenny Galladay's potential could be. So again, I don't hate Kenny Galladay. I think he's a good player. I just do not love the situation because I don't see too much upside. He had 32 targets last year, 20 receptions, 338 receiving yards, and 2 total touchdowns. Again, nothing great about those numbers because he only played in 5 games. In years prior, in 2019, this guy was an absolute fucking animal. He had 116 targets. He had 65 receptions. He had 1,190 receiving yards, which was 6th highest at the wide receiver position. And he had 11 total touchdowns, number 1 at wide receiver. So this guy's a very talented player. The situation, though, to me, it's not good. It's just not good. I don't trust Daniel Jones, and I don't trust the Giants for Mr. Kenny Galladay. And it sucks, but that's where he'll be for the next couple of years. And sadly, unless Daniel Jones obviously comes out and balls out, which is possible, I think Kenny Galladay will end up being a wasted pick. If you guys have ended up enjoying this video, we're about halfway through this wide receiver dissection. Please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. I would really appreciate it, and you're going to appreciate it as well because the content is going to be super hot fire. I spit that 2.5 men. I watched that. Next wide receiver to be talking about here is a guy that went from being on top of the world to riding his Corvette, Juju Smith-Schuster, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Current underdog ADP 78.8. I don't remember if I said Kenny Galladay's. His is 57.4. So Juju is going a little bit later than Kenny Galladay, and he is going right now. I think that he is going behind Deontay Johnson, but ahead of Chase Claypool. If I'm being honest with you, I don't love this situation in Pittsburgh for Juju Smith-Schuster. I was hoping, for Juju's sake, that this guy was going to end up going to kind of a different team, right? I was thinking, you know what, maybe he can go to, I don't even know, like the Chiefs? Maybe that was a thought. He could end up going to the Chiefs, or maybe he ends up going to another team that's just going to be passing the ball more, and that he is the clear wide receiver 2 in that scenario. If he went to Baltimore, while I wouldn't have loved it for fantasy football, right, I would have thought, you know what, maybe in that case, he could be really good because he would be the clear wide receiver 1 in Baltimore, obviously. But he ends up signing back with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and to me, I just don't love that. I just don't feel ultra confident with him in Pittsburgh. Last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers threw the ball 65.48% of the time. To put that into perspective, they were the 2nd highest passing offense in the NFL, and they were up there with the Jags, the Texans, Detroit. Those are the top 4 teams. They were the only good team in the top 4. Right? And they're throwing the ball so much. Why? Because the offensive line sucked complete and utter donkey cock last season. It was not the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line in the past where it's basically a brick wall. You have so much time to run through it. No, that is not what he had. They did not have that last year, so Ben's being forced to air it out, and it was kind of working, right? But they're throwing the ball so much. I think that with Najee Harris there, with a better offensive line, realistically, you would hope that maybe they're not throwing the ball as much, and that's going to hurt Juju. It's going to hurt all the wide receivers, but I think Juju, who has kind of went, his fall from grace was insane. This guy and Antonio Brown, this is like a wombo combo of the century, a 1-2 fucking left-right from Mike Tyson type of connection here, and then magically, it just all disappeared. Mr. Antonio Brown got his cold feet, and he decided to go ahead and go to the Las Vegas Raiders. And after that, Juju's career went from spiking, going directly to land on the moon, to going directly through the pits of the earth into hell. He was fucking terrible. Okay? Juju wasn't that good last year. In 16 games, finishing as wide receiver 16 in PPR, 18.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 22 in standard. But again, you have to bring up the points per game as well, because he finished super high because he played in 16 games. From a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 23 in PPR, tied with his boy Antonio Brown, wide receiver 27 in half PPR, tied with Curtis Samuel, and wide receiver 32 in standard, tied with CeeDee Lamb and Nelson Aguilar, averaging 14.6 PPR points per game, 11.6 half PPR points per game, and 8.6 standard points per game. Now, I believe that this team is going to be throwing the ball less in 2021, and I believe that Juju Smith-Schuster is much less of an importance to this offense as ever. He's on a one-year deal. He's on a one-year deal. He's trying to prove it. I'm not too sure if he's going to be able to prove it. I think he's going to be gone after this season. He had a grand total of 128 targets, 15th highest at wide receiver, 97 receptions, 7th highest at wide receiver, and only 831 receiving yards, 9 total touchdowns. What about that makes you happy to draft Juju? Gets all the targets, all the receptions, does nothing in the yards category. Like, what is he doing? What is he doing? He was not good really at all last year. I think that if they significantly drop back in throwing the ball, that was a weird look right there, but if they drop down in throwing the ball, they're running the ball more. I don't see the upside for Juju. I just don't. Maybe you can talk me out of it, or maybe you talk me into Juju, but right now, I do not believe very heavily in Juju Smith-Schuster. And final player to be talking about today is a guy that I've been fading for the last 7,000 years, Odell Beckham Jr., wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns, underdog ADP 65.8. This is the lowest he's been in a while. People are finally starting to realize that Odell Beckham Jr. is not what Odell Beckham was when he reached back like 1-3, shout out to Drake, up against the Dallas Cowboys. It's not him anymore. And I genuinely believe that Odell is still a good wide receiver. I do. I think he's one of, he's not like a top 10 wide receiver, right? But he's not like a shitty wide receiver, right? Like, a lot of teams would be salivating. They'd be nutting everywhere to get Odell on their team, right? But he's on a team that likes to run the ball. And in my opinion, I'm not looking to draft a wide receiver on a team that, runs the ball a lot. That, to me, is not the most smart idea. Looking at this chart right here, Cleveland Browns, 52.22% passing percentage, pass play percentage. That is 29th in the NFL. 29th in the NFL. 52.22% of the time. Why is that? It's about what I spoke about last year. Kevin Stefanski, former offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, is their head coach, and he was the guy feeding the ball down Dalvin Cook's throat. He likes to run the ball. And when you have Kareem Hunt, when you have Nick Chubb, why wouldn't you run the ball? Why wouldn't you run the ball? It's free yards. It's free real estate. You just fucking hand it off, and they run. But, Nick, Odell only played in 7 games last year. We have not seen what Odell can really be. Come on. We saw him in 2019 in Cleveland as well. And he just was not very good. He just was not very good last year. Playing 7 games, finished as wide receiver, 89 in PPR, 85.5 PPR, and 75 in standard. From a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 39 in PPR, 35.5 PPR, tied with Cooper Kupp and Sterling Shepard. Wide receiver 25 in standard, tied with Terry McLaurin, averaging 12.4 PPR points per game, 10.8 half PPR points per game, and 9.1 standard points per game. So while I think that Odell isn't necessarily a shitty wide receiver like some people will say, I wouldn't even say he's overrated at this point, but what I would say is that he's being drafted too high for me to want to draft him, and the fact is, unless his ADP went significantly further back, I probably would not feel comfortable drafting him because I don't see too much upside in an offense that likes to run the ball so much as the Cleveland Browns. If magically their philosophy changed, they're like, Baker, you're going to throw it fucking 60% of the time, then I'm like, hallelujah, I'm drafting Odell Beckham Jr. But that's just not going to be the case. I don't think Kevin Stefanski is going to have a philosophy shift after that running offense, the run power offense, worked last season to get them to the playoffs. So, don't really see that changing. I think Odell is a flash in the past. Maybe if he goes to a different team, he could be good. But for now, it's just going to be years of sadness for those who draft Odell Beckham Jr. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. I hope you guys have a great rest of your guys' day. Stay safe, and I'll see you beautiful bastards tomorrow with another banger of a video. As always, guys, stay safe. Goodbye.